All right, welcome back to right now. In this video, we are talking about how much protein you need. So I know this is backwards still. I'm gonna have to figure out a new way to do this, but since I have this board right now, I'm just gonna keep rolling with it. Okay, so we're gonna talk about how much protein you need every day. Now I will say, since our bodies work in a 7-day cycle, sometimes this can change based on the day of the week, but generally you want to aim for this average per day throughout the week. So like a 7-day cycle. What if the protein amount that you should be hitting is like 120 grams, just make sure that it's evening out throughout the week. So like if you hit 180 one day, maybe like go 90 another day, instead of like always trying to hit that number. If you're having trouble with it, just know that like on average, it should be like that over the course of the 7 days, just like calories kind of do as well. We'll get into that deeper once we've covered all of the macronutrients. So the average minimum daily amount that you should be getting set by the CDC and the NIH is 0.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So that's the minimum, and then the max is 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if you're in the US and you use the poundage and things like that, 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So basically, like you're aiming for 1 gram per pound of protein per day. So I'm a 126-pound girl, woman, whatever. My average should be about 126 grams. That is going to be like on the heavier side, and I'll go into details about like how you should be deciding how much you eat in a day. But I'm very active. My goal is recomposition and muscle gain. So having enough protein is super essential for me in order to do that. Plus, it just, like I said, it keeps me satiated longer. So it's just one of those things, like if I'm in a calorie deficit and I'm getting more protein, then I'm going to be a lot more satisfied and less hungry. If I'm eating more protein, has a higher thermogenic effect than any other macronutrient, so higher than carbs and fats. So just in general, like for an active population, I usually go with 1 gram per pound of body weight for a lot of my clients. But it is definitely up to you and how you want to find like your ideal value. So let's say you're 130 pounds and you want to go with maybe like 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So what you would do is take your body weight, 130 divided by 2.2 is 59, and then multiply that by 1.2 is like 71 grams of protein per day. That honestly seems like so low to me. But like they also recommend about 10 to 35% of your daily caloric intake. So generally what I find is if I'm giving people 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein, it's usually between 20 to 30%. And the population that I work with are all active individuals. So if you're listening to this, you should probably fall into that category. But if you're finding that it's really difficult for you to get in like the amount of carbs that you need or the amount of fat that you need, you might consider playing with this range and seeing if another amount works for you. And like I said, like you don't have to get that amount of protein in every single day. If you're doing like a day of 80 or 90, the next day is like 140 or 150, then over the course of 7 days, you're probably going to average out that 130. You know what I mean? So like there's nothing wrong with the protein fast. We'll kind of get into that, and that's going to be a little bit down the line. I wouldn't recommend that more than 1 time a week, but it could be very beneficial depending on your goals and where you're at health-wise. So I just want to do this real quick, but if you're 130 pounds and you're eating 0.8 grams per kilogram, that low end, again, that's the minimum. So that's just like what you need to survive. Whenever you see a minimum in anything, in terms of nutrition, that is like the absolute lowest you can go without seeing any like very, very harmful deficiency symptoms. So there's a minimum, maximum, there's an optimal for you. So really when we're going through nutrition and things, you want to be able to find what's optimal for you, not what is recommended for the general population. So just remember that when you're trying to figure this stuff out. So 130 divided by 2.2 is 59 kilograms. So you multiply that by 0.8. That seems wrong. But 47 grams of protein is the absolute minimum you should be getting as a 130-pound person. Again, I don't recommend that for active individuals because of what we talked about in the last video about how protein is essential for tissue repair. And if you're breaking down muscle, whether it be in the gym or doing other activity, then you need to make sure that you're getting an adequate amount of protein. That doesn't always have to be 1 gram per pound, but generally it just seems to be like a good number for people to hit. And if you want to go like, there's like a high protein, which I would probably consider 1 gram per pound of protein high. There's also heavy. So you could do like up to 1.2 grams per pound. Now that would be probably someone who's like weightlifting a lot, like their sport is the gym, like in a gym setting, let's say from like a CrossFitter, weightlifter, Olympic weightlifter, things like that. They might benefit from more protein. When I've done reading on this, it says that like endurance athletes don't need as much as other athletes, but I definitely agree they need more carbohydrates and fats and like fuel in that sense. You're definitely going to need enough fuel, and if the protein is taking away from that in terms of like how many calories you're trying to hit, then that might be one thing. But as endurance athletes, you're breaking down your muscle over a long period of time, and you're putting a lot of stress on your hormonal system. And so protein is definitely essential. It never gives a recommended amount of like how much less they should be eating compared to like a weightlifter or a CrossFitter or anything like that. So just really be mindful of that. Listen to your body, listen to how you're recovering. Because if you're getting an adequate amount of carbohydrates and fats, then it might be because you're not getting enough protein in. Another thing I wanted to hit on a little bit more, I mentioned this before, but when it comes to how much you should be eating per meal, generally speaking, I tell people to eat about 50 grams per meal if you're getting in 3 meals a day. Now, obviously, I know that equates to 150 grams. So that's on the high end. But it's just, I think, an easier thing to focus on. Like 50 is a round number, pretty easy. And if it's hard for you to get in protein every single meal, it might be necessary for 2 meals of the day. But you don't have to be going out and drinking like tons of protein shakes or anything like that to hit your numbers. Like it's fairly simple, but it also depends on how active you are throughout the day, how many training sessions that you're doing. But in general, this like whole, like you can only break down 20 grams of protein at a time is like not science. A lot of scientific literature is coming out saying that the amount that you can break down is honestly dependent on how much blood you have in your body. And since everybody has liters of blood, generally speaking, obviously like a taller person is going to have more than like a 6'4" person is going to have more than me, a 5'3" person. But like everyone has that amount of blood in their body, right? So if you like, it's dependent on how much you weigh, how much you can break down per meal as well. So generally speaking, most people can break down 50 grams of protein at a time and be completely okay and be able to use that. There are some things that say like if you can eat too much and you can't eat too little, deficiency can lead to muscle breakdown, which is not what you want, because then you'll get that skinny fat look. You're going to have a lot more fat on you, but you'll kind of look like your skin and bones. And as an athlete, having the right amount of muscle is very, very important for you to do all the functions in your sport. Whether or not you're lifting or not in your sport, you need that explosiveness, that powerfulness, that strength in different situations. So again, like making sure you're getting in enough. You can get too much, and that's where kind of like averaging out for the week comes in. But if you're eating too much, there are things that say that you excrete through your urine, the excess ammonia, and then it can also be converted to glycogen, which is how carbohydrates are stored in the body. So you can basically, your body converts it to use as energy, or it's converted to be used as fat. So just keep that in mind. You can't eat too much protein and you can't eat too little. So there's a balance there. The other thing is I wanted to talk about special populations. So if you're pregnant or lactating, you're going to need more protein than the general population. So instead of that minimum 0.8, your minimum is going to be 0.88 to that should be 1.1. 1.1. Fix that real quick. All right, so that's your minimum. And that's just based on like how much you're lactating, how big your baby is, how many babies you're having, or how many babies you're nursing. There's a lot that goes into it, but your body is trying to make another human being. So you're going to need more protein in order to support that process. The other thing is older adults are going to need more protein in general than the general population. Their minimum is 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram. And that's going to be because as we get older, it's generally easier for our muscle to break down. There's this thing called sarcopenia, which kills more people than anything else, which is because it's a breakdown of muscle. If you don't have enough muscle to support yourself, you won't have enough strength to get up off the ground, and you can break things a lot easier. So having an adequate amount of protein is going to be important to make sure that you're maintaining that muscle mass. And then obviously that depends, like both of these also depend on if you're active female who's pregnant or an active older adult. Again, those are just the minimums. And then the other special population consideration is if you have liver or kidney disease, then you're going to need less protein because it's going to be harder for your body to break down the protein that you're giving it if you have issues with one of these. So yours is actually a decrease compared to the population, and it's going to be a 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilogram. I'm not specialized in that, but I did want to make note of that for anyone that may be like dealing with this or have a family member that's dealing with this and you're trying to like help them in any way that you can. Just remember, it's going to be harder for them to eat or break down that protein once they eat it. So just keep that in mind. But that's how much protein you should be eating in general. And then finding the right balance for you is going to be really important based on your activity levels, what your goals are. Always come back to your goals because that's going to like really make or break what you're doing. So make sure you have goals in the first place. And if you do have those goals, take into consideration how much activity that requires in the gym, so that exercise, activity, thermogenesis, and then how much activity you're doing outside of the gym, so that non-exercise activity, thermogenesis. Yeah, that is protein for you. Again, I'm not going to get too much into what foods you can do, but in general, what I would say for increasing your protein, I think I'm just going to get into this in a different video so it's just easier to access. So I'll see you in the next video.